Glisten, özür dilerim. Molfishmich karakter arası tam uzunlukta hikaye yeniden yazıyorum. The small hand lying in the mud wasn't moving. Audrey Hepburn dropped to her knees. The edges of her white blouse, the one she'd worn to meet government officials that morning, touched the red earth. The UNICEF officials around her waited. Photographers lowered their cameras. Translators fell silent. Nobody told her what she should do. The October heat of 1988 in Ethiopia's Mekelle region rose from the dried soil like invisible flames. Audrey had been in this country for 3 days now. 3 days of touring famine camps, witnessing devastation that Hollywood had never prepared her for. She had thought she understood poverty from her childhood in war-torn Holland, but this was different. This was systematic starvation. This was death walking openly among children, who should have been playing, laughing, dreaming. Every tent, every face, every labored breath taught her something new about the fragility of human existence. The weight of celebrity felt meaningless here. The beautiful gowns hanging in her closet back in Switzerland seemed obscene when measured against this reality. But this moment was different from everything that had come before. The 7-year-old girl had died during the night. Her mother, Almaz, had been sitting beside the small body since dawn, not speaking, not crying, just sitting in the position mothers take when the world stops making sense. Her calloused hand rested protectively over her daughter's smaller one, as if she could still shield her from harm. The UNICEF team hadn't wanted to bring Audrey to this particular tent. Dr. James Grant, the executive director who had personally invited her on this mission, had specifically instructed the local coordinators to focus on the survivors, the success stories, the children who were recovering thanks to international aid. This was supposed to be about hope, about progress, about how celebrity endorsement could translate into funding and awareness, but Audrey had insisted on seeing everything. "I can't tell people about what I don't understand," she had said that morning. "I won't be a tourist in someone else's tragedy." The local coordinator, Dr. Alamahu Warku, a thin man whose English carried the careful precision of someone who had learned it in mission schools, approached carefully. He had been working in these camps for 2 years. He had seen delegations come and go, politicians, aid workers, journalists, even a few celebrities. Most wanted sanitized versions of suffering, clean stories they could tell at fundraising dinners back home. "Miss Hepburn," he said softly, "perhaps we could move to the nutrition tent now. There are children there who would benefit from meeting you. This situation here," he gestured helplessly toward the mother and child, "there's nothing we can do here." Audrey didn't respond immediately. She was studying the scene with the intense focus she had once reserved for memorizing scripts. The mother's face was carved with grief, but also with something else, a fierce protectiveness that death hadn't been able to touch. The small girl looked peaceful, as if she were simply sleeping deeply after a long day of play. "What was her name?" Audrey asked quietly. Dr. Alamahu hesitated. "Kiddist. It means blessed one in Amharic." "Kiddist," Audrey repeated, the foreign syllables feeling strange but important on her tongue. The mother, Almaz, wasn't looking up. Her attention remained focused entirely on her daughter's face. Her lips were moving in barely audible whispers, speaking in Amharic, words that rose and fell like a lullaby. Dr. Alamahu listened for a moment, then chose not to translate. Some conversations were too private for interpretation, but Audrey understood without translation. She had whispered the same kinds of words to her own sons during their childhood illnesses. Universal phrases of love and protection that every mother knows by instinct. Audrey reached into her canvas bag, the practical one she had bought specifically for this trip instead of her usual designer handbags. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was something she had carried across an ocean without really understanding why. A small toy elephant made of pink fabric, worn soft from years of love. It had belonged to her son Sean during his early childhood, before he outgrew such comforts. She had brought it on every UNICEF mission since accepting her role as Goodwill Ambassador. Not for any specific purpose, just as a talisman, a reminder of maternal love perhaps, or simply a piece of home to carry into foreign grief. Without speaking, she placed the toy elephant beside Kiddist. The action caused Almaz to look up for the first time. Her eyes, red-rimmed but sharp with intelligence, moved from the toy to Audrey's face. She studied this foreign woman kneeling in the dirt, this pale stranger who wore simple clothes but carried herself with unmistakable grace. Two mothers looked at each other across an impossible divide of language, culture, and circumstance, yet somehow they were speaking, silently, in the universal language of maternal recognition. Almaz reached out slowly and took Audrey's hand. Her palm was rough from years of subsistence farming, warm despite the loss that surrounded her. They stayed that way for several minutes. The UNICEF team maintained respectful distance. The photographers, mostly freelancers hoping to capture dramatic images for international magazines, had the wisdom to keep their cameras lowered. This moment belonged to grief, not to documentation. Dr. Alamayahu would write in his journal that night. In those minutes I watched Miss Hepburn transform. The elegant actress disappeared completely. What remained was simply a woman recognizing another woman's pain and offering the only comfort she could, her presence. Finally, Almaz began to speak. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but clear. She spoke in careful, measured sentences, pausing between thoughts to allow Dr. Alamayahu time to translate. She says thank you for coming to see her daughter. She says the toy is beautiful. Kiddist loved pink very much. She asks, Dr. Alamayahu hesitated, then continued. She asks if you have children of your own. Audrey nodded, her own voice catching slightly. Yes, 2 sons. Almaz asked another question, and Dr. Alamayahu translated. Do you kiss them every night before they sleep? Yes, Audrey whispered. Every night when I'm home. The conversation that followed was punctuated by long silences, moments when emotion made words inadequate. Almaz spoke about Kiddist's personality, how she had loved to sing, how she had helped tend their small goat, how she had never complained even as the hunger grew worse. She spoke about the 3-day walk to reach this camp, carrying her weakening daughter, believing that help would be available. She says, Dr. Alamayahu translated carefully, that she understands God needed angels, but she wishes he had chosen someone else's child. She says this is selfish, but she cannot help thinking it. Audrey's tears came then, silent and steady. In all her years of performing, of creating artificial emotions for cameras, she had never cried with such unguarded honesty. This wasn't the delicate weeping of cinema, but the raw grief of recognizing unbearable truth. Almaz continued speaking, and her words, translated, revealed a wisdom born from unimaginable loss. She says you came from very far away to see her sadness. She says this means God has not forgotten them, even when it feels like he has. She says she will pray for your children to grow strong and never know hunger. The blessing hit Audrey like a physical force. Here was a woman who had lost everything, offering prayers for the safety of a stranger's children. The generosity was overwhelming, almost impossible to accept. Please tell her, Audrey said to Dr. Alamayahu, that I will never forget Kiddist, that I will tell people about her, that her daughter's name will not be lost. When this was translated, Almaz smiled for the first time. It was a small smile shadowed by grief, but genuine. She picked up the pink elephant and placed it carefully on Kiddist's chest, arranging it with the tenderness she might have shown tucking her daughter into bed on an ordinary night in a different world. Dr. Alamayahu, who had been working in crisis zones for most of his adult life, found himself struggling to maintain professional composure. Years later, he would tell colleagues that witnessing this exchange changed his understanding of why celebrity advocates mattered. It wasn't about their fame or their ability to attract media attention. It was about their capacity to see suffering clearly and respond with genuine humanity. Audrey stood slowly, her knees stiff from kneeling on the hard ground. She looked down at Kiddist one last time, memorizing the small face, the pink elephant rising and falling with the stillness that had replaced breathing. As the team prepared to move to other areas of the camp, Audrey walked backward for several steps, unable to break her visual connection with Almaz and Kiddist. The mother had resumed her vigil, but something had shifted. She was no longer alone in her grief. A toy elephant shared her watch, and somewhere in the world a stranger would remember her daughter's name. The remainder of that day passed in a blur of similar encounters, though none affected Audrey quite as profoundly. She met children who were recovering, mothers who had made the trek to the camp in time, aid workers who explained the logistics of food distribution and medical care. She listened to survival stories that should have been uplifting, and they were, but Kiddist's stillness had created a gravity that pulled all other experiences toward it. That evening, in the simple guest house where the UNICEF team was staying, Audrey sat on her narrow bed and wrote in the journal she had started keeping for this trip. Her usually elegant handwriting was shaky, emotional. Today I met a mother named Almaz and her daughter Kiddist. I gave them a toy elephant that belonged to Sean. I don't know why I brought it. I don't know why I gave it away. I only know that nothing in my life has prepared me to understand what I witnessed. The love between that mother and child was so pure it made everything else seem trivial. I think about my boys safe in boarding school, worried about homework and friends, and I cannot comprehend this alternative universe where children die of hunger while food exists elsewhere in abundance. She paused, staring at the words she had written, then continued, I came here thinking I would help by bringing attention to the crisis, but I am the one who has been changed. How do I return to scripts and premieres and interviews about hemlines when I have seen what I have seen? How do I justify that life anymore? Dr. Grant found her there an hour later, still writing, still processing. He knocked gently on her open door. May I come in? Audrey nodded, closing her journal but keeping her finger between the pages to mark her place. That was difficult today, he said, settling into the room's single chair. I'm sorry you had to witness that. We try to balance the need for honesty with the emotional toll on our advocates. Don't apologize, Audrey said firmly. This is exactly what I needed to see. This is why I'm here. Dr. Grant studied her carefully. He had worked with many celebrity ambassadors over the years. Most were well-intentioned, but few possessed the emotional fortitude to engage deeply with the realities of their advocacy. Those who did often burned out quickly, overwhelmed by the scope of global suffering. What you did today, with the mother and the toy, that wasn't planned or scripted. That came from you. It felt like the only appropriate response. Everything else would have been performance. Yes, he said quietly. That's exactly right, and that's why this partnership will work. But Audrey, you need to know that there are thousands of kiddists, tens of thousands. You can't save them all. You can't carry them all. Audrey looked at him steadily. But I can carry some. I can make sure some of them are remembered. Isn't that what this is about? Making the invisible visible. The next morning brought visits to other camps, other faces, other stories. Audrey approached each encounter with the same careful attention she had shown Almaz and Kiddist. She learned names. She asked about dreams and fears. She listened to survival strategies that revealed human resilience at its most fundamental level. But the pink elephant had established a precedent. At each stop, Audrey found herself reaching into her bag for small tokens to leave behind. A bracelet given to her by a designer, a pen from a hotel in Rome, a hair ribbon that had belonged to her mother. Each gift was tiny, practically meaningless, but the act of giving created connections that transcended cultural barriers. The UNICEF photographers began to understand what they were witnessing. This wasn't typical celebrity advocacy, where famous faces posed with photogenic children for predetermined shots. This was genuine engagement, unpredictable, and therefore powerful. By the time they reached their final camp, word had somehow spread that the famous actress was different from other visitors. Mothers brought their children specifically to meet her, not because they recognized her face, but because other mothers had passed along word that this foreign woman saw children as individuals, not as statistics. The journey back to Addis Ababa was quiet. Audrey sat in the back seat of the Land Rover, watching the landscape pass by. Ethiopia's beauty was heartbreaking in its contrast to the suffering she had witnessed. The same soil that couldn't support crops created stunning vistas. The same clear skies that brought no rain offered magnificent sunsets. Dr. Alamai Hugh, who had accompanied them throughout the trip, finally broke the silence. Miss Hepburn, what will you tell people when you return home? Audrey considered the question carefully before answering. I'll tell them about Kittist, about Alamaz, about mothers who love their children exactly the way we love ours, but who can't protect them from things we never have to think about. I'll tell them that hunger isn't an abstract concept. It has names and faces and dreams that get cut short, and you think that will make a difference. It has to, because the alternative is accepting that some children matter more than others, and I can't live with that. When Audrey Hepburn returned to Switzerland, she was carrying something heavier than luggage. The faces she had memorized, the names she had written in her journal, the weight of witness that comes with seeing suffering clearly. She kept her promise to Almaz. In interviews, speeches, and private conversations, she spoke about Kiddist by name, not as a symbol or statistic, but as a specific child who had loved pink, and singing, and helping with the family goat. The pink elephant became part of her advocacy, a small but powerful reminder that behind every crisis were individual losses that deserved to be acknowledged. Years later, when Audrey's own health began failing, she would return to Ethiopia multiple times. She never again encountered Almaz, though she asked after her at every camp. But the connection forged over a toy elephant and shared maternal recognition had changed something fundamental in how she understood her role in the world. In her final interview, conducted just months before her death, Audrey was asked about her greatest achievement. Without hesitation, she answered, learning to see clearly. Learning that beauty and suffering can exist in the same space, and that witnessing both is a privilege that comes with responsibilities. She never mentioned Kiddist by name in that interview. Some experiences were too sacred for public consumption, but those who knew her well understood what she meant. The pink elephant had taught her that true grace existed not in perfect poses for cameras, but in imperfect moments of human recognition, in the willingness to kneel in mud, in the courage to see what couldn't be fixed and bear witness anyway, and in remembering that sometimes the most important gift you can give is simply the promise never to forget.